In the last video, we talked about what functions were. Among the different types of functions that we looked at, we specifically looked at linear functions. The reason they're called linear functions is because they describe a line. So let's take an example. Remember that a linear function is of the form f of x equals m times x plus c, where m and c are constants. So let's suppose that the constants we're going to take are m is a half and c is 1, then we have the linear function f of x equals 0.5 times x plus 1. So let's plug in various values of x and see what the value of the function is going to be. So when x is minus 1, we can calculate f of x as 0.5 times x. So we get here 0.5 times minus 1 plus 1. So that's 0.5 times minus 1 is minus 0.5 plus 1, and so we get a half, or 0.5. So if I wanted to plot this, on the horizontal axis, we'll put x. On the vertical axis, we'll put the value of f of x, which will represent by y. So when x is minus 1, f of x is going to be a half. So we can mark this point right here. Let's do this again for x equals 0. We get 0.5 times 0, which is 0, plus 1. So f of 0 is just 1. So when x equals 0, we get f of x equals 1. Let's do this one more time, but with x equals 1. A half times x is a half times 1, so it's just 0.5 plus 1. So add 1, so we get 1.5, 1.5. So when x equals 1, we get f of x is 1.5. So we get this point here. So our function gave us these three different points. So this one corresponds to -1, this one to 0, and this one to -1. In fact, for every possible value of x, we could have calculated f of x. So when we mark all the points, x and f of x, we get a straight line. And that's why linear functions are called that, because linear functions represent lines. When we look at this line, it's angled upwards in some sense, and that's what we call the slope of the line. If you take any linear function of the form mx plus c, m is what determines how steep this line is. And so m is called the slope of the line. Specifically, the slope tells us if we increment x by 1, how much does f of x increase? In other words, how much does mx plus c increase? And the answer is m. You may have seen this in your earlier math courses that the slope of a line can be expressed as rise over run. So if we run x by 1, how much does the function rise? So it rises from here to here. So that's the rise. We've run x by 1, and the value of the function has risen by m. So that's m over 1, which is just m. So writing that down mathematically, if we take two different points, x1 and x2, if we go from x1 to x2, how much are we increasing x? By this much. And if we did so, how much would we be increasing f of x? We'd be increasing it by this much, because this is f of x1, this is f of x2. If we take the ratio of the rise in the value of f of x, which is this much, to the amount that we're running x, so we're increasing x, which is this much, we have this expression. F of x2 minus f of x1 divided by x2 minus x1. F of x2 minus f of x1 is just this, so that's the rise. x2 minus x1 is this, that's the run. And so if we take the ratio of rise to run, we get the slope of the function.